We call it the Mega. It's 20 kilowatts of power, as powerful as the highest power satellites that have flown to date. Next year, we're going to start working on the Giga, which is a 100 kilowatt satellite, which will be the highest power satellite that's ever been created.
What's happening in the world of space right now?
What's considered the infrastructure play today is very different than what it was 10 years ago.
Do you realize how much money the government will have to spend in order to build this?
Every single part of our spacecraft is designed by somebody who is the best at what they do.
How are you able to do that?
No one thought that was possible. In March, we'll prove it, right? And we'll show that it actually is.
Hi, everyone. I'm Connor Love, and this is The Investment Memo, the show where founders reveal the stories behind their multi-billion-dollar deals. Today, I'm joined by Karan Kunjur, founder and CEO of K2 Space, a company that builds large satellites designed to be more powerful, more flexible, cheaper to manufacture than the systems used today. We'll talk about how this idea took shape, what early growth looked like, and why their approach will define the next era of space infrastructure. Karan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Congrats on the Series C, huge milestone for the company.
Appreciate it, yeah.
I thought we'd do something a little different. I wanted to put our investment memo in front of you that we first wrote when we first partnered at the Series B. Would love just to share it with you, get some of your reactions, and then dive into the business.
I always wondered what was in here, so this is cool.
Let's get into it. I know there's a lot there, and we have a ton to discuss. I thought maybe I could just set the scene for us and talk a little bit about the context of not only the market, but the world that you're building in today. We obviously know the space ecosystem is changing at a rapid pace. Both infrastructure is being built to change the nature of what space looks like, and that exists on the commercial side, that exists on the defense side. I mean, what we see with the Department of War, defense budgets increasing for space-based systems and space-based capabilities. You seem to be sitting right at the center of it and have the ability to not only change the future trajectory of our space ecosystem, but also hopefully positively impact the United States and our allies. So I'd love to just get your take and maybe start with what's happening in the world of space right now.
Yeah, there's a lot happening at the same time. If you think about the US government, right? We went from, over the last 20 years, kind of being a leader, almost untouchable in space, to now having what's called a near-peer adversary, right, in China, which has meant that the focus over the last 5 years has shifted to resilience. Like, how do we, as a nation, have resilient space architecture? There are capabilities that we used to have that were within a single satellite, like a single exquisite satellite that cost $1 billion in 10 years to make, or there are capabilities that were sitting within a single orbit. Resilience today means adding many more satellites and adding many more orbits, right? Where you're only doing LEO historically, now you do MEO. Where you're only doing one satellite, now you do many. So that's one big change. And the other big change we're seeing on the commercial side is you had these legacy operators that saw their cash cow get completely disrupted, right, by SpaceX. And all of them are figuring out how to reset their cost structure to compete in a world where SpaceX is a serious competitor.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, SpaceX completely changed, cost per kilograms to orbit, which is good for K2, it's good for the long-tail space companies. But what that also does is that changes what infrastructure will look like in space, right?
A move to more orbits, a move to more proliferation, like what's considered the infrastructure play today is very different than what it was 10 years ago.
I even think too, a good, kind of frame of reference that I have is just looking at the pure amount of satellites we have in space.
Yep.
And I think often, when we look at these new technology markets, both as investors and as entrepreneurs, we are so grossly off in how big these markets can be. And again, I always use the example like World War I, we had, call it 5,000 to 10,000 planes that existed. We roughly have that many satellites. Again, some of it's classified, some of it's not. But the idea is we have hundreds of thousands of planes and drones today in the air. We're going to have a similar number, if not more, that exists in the space ecosystem.
Exactly.
It's interesting. I mean, we know that the ecosystem's growing. We know the nature of what is needed to, exist in space is changing. When we move away from just LEO, we talk about, one, you're in a different orbit. You have a different aperture, but you also have different requirements. What needs to change when you talk about going to further orbits and having different types of capabilities in space?
Yeah, you take an orbit like MEO, which stands for medium Earth orbit, right? MEO has historically been a super difficult orbit to operate in, right? You needed to have a lot of radiation tolerance, you need to have a lot of propulsion to be able to get there, you need a bigger antenna, you needed more power. Historically, that's been really costly, right? So almost no one operated in MEO. Like, unclassified US government way we operated in MEO was the GPS constellation. That was about it.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. 32 satellites in total.
Yeah.
That's actually, I don't think people realize there are 32 satellites in total in the GPS constellation that everyone relies on every single day.
Yeah.
So yeah, MEO has historically been really hard. But if you figure out how to do MEO, there's some really interesting aspects to it, right? From like a coverage perspective, if you want to do a global constellation with global coverage, you only need like 20 satellites in MEO. That same number at LEO is like 1,000, right?
Yeah.
For MEO, you can have wide field of view. So you can see a lot of the Earth at the same time. You can be over your target markets for a longer period of time. So there's some really interesting things about MEO. Just historically, it's been a really difficult, really bad orbit.
Maybe take us back then. I mean, when you started the business, I mean, what was the core thesis? Where did you start? With that in mind of what you just said, where did K2 start?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like when we started K2, everyone was going down this path of small satellites for LEO, because that was viewed as the only way to drive down price, drive down the cost of the satellite, and increase the speed of production. It was going smaller. But the problem is, if you look at almost every application in space, it ties back to power. And when we went smaller, we built satellites with smaller solar arrays that had less power. So we were going cheaper, like, great, you're 50% cheaper on your satellite, but you're 10% as effective from a power perspective. And so it's so clear to us that this was like the wrong direction. And you layer on top of that the rise in launch capacity, both the size of the launch vehicles going up and the frequency of the launches going up. And for us, the answer was like very clear. Like the answer was not to go smaller. It was actually the opposite direction. At the time, it was a complete contrarian bet. The answer was build bigger, right? Build bigger satellites for this, what we called mass abundant future that we saw. It completely changes the way you operate in space, right? You're not resigned to a single orbit where you're constrained to all the constraints of that orbit. You can go multi-orbit and optimize at a system level.
You talk about being in a different orbit allows you to have a different aperture, a different kind of view of either the ground or of space. What can you do that's different given the approach that you've taken?
So when you build bigger, you can start to do some really interesting things. You can start to max out power. So our platform has as much power as the highest power satellites that have ever been built. You can start to build for radiation tolerance to be able to handle high radiation environments like MEO. You can build redundancy and reliability. I can start to take on, all right, well, if I need more redundancy, I'm going to have 2 separate propulsion systems. You can't do that when you're building smaller. You can build that when you're building bigger. And so what you end up with is a platform that has more power than any other platform, can go anywhere in the solar system, and be used in an industrial way, mass produced here in my factory at 100 satellites per year. Those are all the consequences of us going bigger and really using mass to our advantage in satellite design.
It's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, especially looking at the Department of War and what our federal government wants, what you are describing is enabling the US and our allies to conduct missions that we've never been able to conduct. Or if we have been able to conduct them, doing them for hundreds of millions of dollars, not tens of millions.
Yeah, a perfect example is GPS, right? Like you look at GPS, 32 satellites. You want to know the way they deployed the constellation? They did 1 Lockheed satellite per launch vehicle going up to the MEO location. There's this program called Resilient GPS, and we showed them, we're like, hey, rather than 1 per launch vehicle, we could deploy 6 or 7 per launch vehicle. We can get dropped off in LEO, and we can take ourselves to that final GPS orbit. Completely changes the game. It takes you from a paradigm of only having 32 satellites for your GPS constellation to potentially having more than 100. And like that's what resilience looks like for the US government.
Everyone, when they talk about space, they think about launch and cost per kilograms in space. I think that the paradigm shift that you are creating is actually almost like cost per unit of energy in space. It's like, again, like rough numbers here, but what did a Boeing 702, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars to get something of that size, of that scope. When you vertically integrate, you can deliver more power, more delta V in a way that inherently is cheaper and better for not only the American taxpayer, but also the long tail of commercial customers.
Exactly.
Maybe let's just go a little bit deeper on the product. The obvious question here is like, how are you able to do that? I mean, a lot of what you're doing is vertical integration, building first-of-a-kind products, or at least your version of a first-of-a-kind product. What has the product journey looked like?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, it started with the first contrarian bet, which was like, let's go bigger. What becomes possible now that you do go bigger? But turned into this like massive engineering challenge where we basically had to reset the entire supply chain. Right? We had to go rebuild 80% of the spacecraft, everything from the thrusters through to the solar arrays. We had to go redesign from scratch and start on our own. We knew we needed thrusters. We ended up meeting Rafael Martinez, who designed high-powered thrusters, and now we're building the highest powered thruster that's ever flown, right, by 4x. There was giant solar arrays. We knew we had to build that from scratch. We built it from scratch. We took on all the engineering challenges of it, and now we're going to find out in a few months.
I mean, this was one of my favorite things. I mean, what you're doing is really large, as we talked about, but It's also, complex in a way where you need to design what is unique to K2 and unique to the satellite and the mission. This is really hard just for a bunch of people to throw these different components together and figure it out, right?
Yeah, we've had to vertically integrate the entire stack for operating in space, right? In a totally different way, like in a way where you're at a power regime that no one really has operated at, in a way that you're operating across orbits in a way that nobody else has. And all of these different components that we're talking about are all part of that full vertical integration of the stack.
Let's talk about that. I mean, you have the mega satellite, as you call it, the 20 kilowatt satellite. What has gone into that? Like, maybe talk a little bit about the Gravitas mission coming up, what you're doing on the mission, what you hope to do.
Yeah, so Gravitas is the first full-size satellite coming off the line. We call it the Mega. It's 20 kilowatts of power. And so for reference, that's as powerful as the highest power satellites that have flown to date, right? It has all the capabilities that our government and commercial customers are excited about. It has the 20 kilowatts of power. It has the 20 kilowatt Hull thruster system, the electric propulsion system that's 4 times more powerful. It has the full power systems. It has the large reaction wheels. It has all this tech that we've built that we're testing for the first time all together.
Yeah.
We're going to test it in LEO and really make sure that the solar arrays deploy that the first time we fire this thruster. Like, no one has ever fired a 20 kilowatt thruster on orbit. We're going to go do that, right? And then we're going to see if it works. And we're going to figure out, once all these components work in LEO, we're going to go test it and take it up to MEO and see how far we get, right? It's a lot of new systems coming together. We're going to be learning a lot as we go. We'll see how far we get. The whole idea here was to get on orbit as fast as possible to start collecting data.
Yeah, I think that's important to talk about, which, again, goes back to the iterative way you've made each of the product decisions within the satellite. It's also the speed at which you're doing this, right? I mean, take a step back and talk about the pace. Like, what have some of those hard decisions been? And in the end, like, how does that define the product ethos of what you're doing at K2?
Yeah, we had a really interesting debate on our first mission, which was earlier this year. We were like, should we go build like a subscale prototype satellite that maybe doesn't have a propulsion system, doesn't have a lot of the things that we need, but just get on orbit with a free flyer? Or should we build the full-size components, just have them ride as a hosted payload on another satellite? And the first path, although it's good from an optics perspective to be able to say like, oh, we've flown this satellite, it actually, from an engineering perspective, doesn't really get you any closer to the answer. And so for us, we were like, we're not going to go in a direction that is orthogonal to our final goal. Our goal is to get the full-size platform online as fast as possible. So we're going to build the full-size components. We're going to fly them. We're going to collect some data, which is what we did earlier this year. And I'm really thankful about that, right? But that was a serious trade for us at the time. It was like, which one do we weigh? And so I think that has kind of driven all of our decisions, which is focus on getting the full-size platform online as fast as possible, get as much data going as fast as possible, know that we're going to learn a lot with this first mission, and then take that learning and put it back into the next mission as fast as possible.
This is the product kind of speed and iteration that I've been so impressed by, which is the ambitious kind of path you are on is you don't want to make incremental change. You want to fundamentally change the landscape of what architecture in space looks like. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the team you've put together. And, I think when I first met you, we had, a series of conversations, your vision, your kind of ability to storytell, your technical proficiency stood out to me. And then in a separate email, when I was emailing, you're like, meet my brother. I was like, oh, shit, the CTO is your brother? Like, your co-founder is your brother? I'm like, how amazing is that you are building a company with your brother? Like, how did that happen? Talk through that. Like, what does that mean to you?
I'm so lucky. Like, I'm building a space company with my brother. It doesn't get better than that. Yeah, I think like we've always talked about starting some company together. When he joined SpaceX, we were like, oh, this could be interesting at some point in time. I had a wandering journey that worked on a few different startups, my last one being a machine learning company. And when I sold that, Neil and I basically were like, there's an interesting opportunity here. Like, let's spend a year just thinking about what we could work on together. And if we don't have something at the end of that year, like, at least we tried. Turns out within 3 months, we were raising a pre-seed from first round and it was off to the races. But it's great. Like, Neil's a genius. It's the coolest thing to see your brother being a genius. And a phenomenal engineer who's looked at by other phenomenal engineers as one of the best, someone that people want to come work with.
Again, from the outside looking in as an investor, I think it's apparent that Neil is one of these engineers who's not only proficient, but also can attract other really talented people to work with him. And as you know quite well on a daily basis, like, these are hard systems to build. There's a lot of different subcomponents. There's a lot of different integration tasks. And in the end, the buck stops with you and Neil. But if you can't attract, folks like Raphael, who you talked about, in the end, like, it's just going to be too hard. I mean, what have you and Neil been able to do? I mean, it's a lot of really high quality engineers. What does the team build look like? And how do you and Neil think about it?
Our thesis has always been that the best engineers want to work with the best engineers on the hardest problems, right? Like even when we were thinking about this challenge of building bigger, Neil was excited by the engineering challenge of that, right? That was part of the motivation for it. It was like clean sheet design on the largest satellites that have ever existed. That's been the tone for the rest of our hiring, right? We found people like Rafael. Like Rafael has his name on the highest number of satellites on orbit when it comes to thrusters, right? Thousands, right? Like Starlink thruster was designed by Rafael, and he joined us because he wanted to build the highest power thruster that's ever flown. And we were like, well, we need the highest power thruster that's ever flown. You know, Drew Miller, he worked on structures and mechanisms on Dragon, a phenomenally capable spacecraft, right? He joined us because he wanted to figure out and build teams that could design massive solar arrays, big reaction wheels, think through the primary structure for that kind of challenge. And so every single part of our spacecraft is designed by somebody who is the best at what they do, that is having a blast doing clean sheet design in this new way.
It's almost like, again, coming back to the kind of brilliance of the product approach, you almost have like 15 different companies in one. I mean, the solar array in itself could be an entire company. You know, the thruster, like you mentioned, it's really, again, I agree with your point that the best engineers go towards the most ambitious things. I think the other thing that's really important is you're doing something that fundamentally matters for our nation and matters for the world. And again, like, you know, this is personal to me, given my national security background, but I think when you described what your satellite could do, the early iterations of what you've built, you know, and then you overlaid that with what's happening from a national security perspective, the light bulb just went off in my head. And I'm like, this is the right solution for our federal government. You've built a national security team that I would define as like A++, one of the best in the game. How did you start that? Who are they? Like what's the team look like?
Very interesting the way you describe that, which is that realization of like what this platform could do and the impact that would have on our national security architecture. Because that's basically how our team was built. Like you take John Plum, right? When he was Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space, we briefed him, right? Neil and I went out and briefed him. And he basically was like, if you can do this, this changes everything. A year later, he joined us full time as our head of strategy, running a large part of our company, right? You take Peter Grettenberg, who was one of the founding program managers for Starshield, the military variant of Starlink at SpaceX. He saw what we were doing, and he saw exactly the path that we could go down, doing what he did in LEO, now doing it in the higher orbits. You know, Andrew Cox, who was the director of SWAC, which is basically the organization that designs all future space architecture for the Space Force. He saw what we were doing, was like, this changes what's possible in terms of future architectures, and knew exactly how, and he joined us in August. And then finally, like someone like Aaron Weiner, who is the former director of one of the towers at the NRO. And for those that don't know, like towers are the major organizations within the NRO. He was the leader, right? He saw the possibilities, like what happens if we can do what we say we're going to do to future space architectures.
I do think this light bulb moment is starting to happen across many people in the federal government, not just the Space Force, not just the NRO, like you mentioned. But maybe we just pause real quick and come back to the Series C fundraise. I mean, first, congrats. Like I said, $250 million into the business, a huge testament of what you've done, but also a huge testament of what you will do in the future. Talk to me about, like, you know, Altimeter's been there from the start. Redpoint, you know, is joining, leading this round. How important is it, the capital stack that you're building? Because in the end, I mean, the goal is super ambitious, but it's hardware. I mean, this is, you know, it's not software, but, you know, this is the real physical stuff.
It's not cheap either, right? Yeah. So for us, we really wanted to build a group of people that we could really trust to have our back over the long run, right? People that are in it for the long term, people that can add a lot of value step by step. No one's really going to teach Neil how to build a satellite, right? Like Neil and his engineers are going to go build a satellite. But what we need is long-term capital partners and people that are going to help us, right? Whether it's like, you know, setting up the right meetings with the right people with the U.S. government, because that's such a big constituency for us. Whether it's calling out certain things or finding interesting people that we should bring on the team, right? Like that's what we look for from our long-term capital partners.
Yeah, well, again, we're really happy to be a part of it, and we look forward to the things to come. So we talked about the thesis, we talked about, you know, kind of the team and some of the different product. You've done a lot too. I mean, I've been almost buried the lead. I mean, I want to hear about the success you've had in the last few years. Share with me, you know, what happened, you know, in the last year.
It was very different than what the market was going at. And so you would expect commercial traction to take a longer period of time. Or you'd expect commercial traction to wait until after this first mission. But instead, what we've seen is actually quite different. You know, over the last 2 years, we've gone from 5 million in TCV in 2023 to 50 million in TCV in 2024. And now we're at 500 million in TCV in 2025. I don't know that many companies out there that hit, you know, $500 million in TCV in the first 3.5 years of existence, right? Which I think speaks to that we're onto something, right? That we're onto something that's truly different that the market values.
people talk about all the risk of only selling to one customer, that is the Department of War. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. Like, there are many different customers within the federal government. But the beauty is you have long-lasting, relationships with the commercial market as well. And that can feed not only the growth of K2, but also the development as it serves the federal government here in the United States, right?
Yeah, the commercial market for us is a relatively unique aspect of our business, right? If you look at a lot of other space companies that are out there, most space companies, their big customers are the US government.
Yeah.
We've found some really interesting commercial customers that are going to make up a large part of our revenue base moving forward. And it puts us in a very unique position where we can now go to the US government and say, hey, we're doing this for a commercial customer. Do you want a variant for that moving forward?
The other piece that matters here is space is a global problem. It's not just a US-centric problem. And so you've very much taken the lens where, there are core, US-centered missions that, us and our allies have. But there's also a commercial market that exists in Europe, that exists in Asia, that exists in Africa, elsewhere in the world. And again, if it comes back to the platform is truly better, is truly more cost efficient, it does change the paradigm of who even can afford it. You're no longer spending $20, $30 billion for Constellation. It's far less than that. And you're almost opening up a market that didn't exist in the past.
Exactly. And government customers, by the way, love that, right? They love the ability that you can say, wait, I have the opportunity as a government customer to leverage billions of dollars in commercial investment and take advantage of that product, where what I'm funding is how do I tailor this capability to my specific need versus clean sheet design. Like, they jump at the opportunity.
Given not only the success you had, but also how the customer starts to orient around the product vision of bigger and more power. I mean, what's happening in the market? How is sentiment shifting towards you and towards others? I'm just curious.
It's pretty funny. So when we started this, it was truly a contrarian bet in 2022, right? We had colonels who were like, big juicy target. Are you guys crazy? Like, why are you doing this? Right? And even like, Frank Calvelli, who is the senior most acquisition authority for all things space, was going around saying, go smaller to go cheaper, faster, and lower NRE, non-recurring engineering, right? About 12 months after he was going around saying that, we met him and we said, hey, sir, we'd love to talk to you about what we're working on. You say go smaller to go cheaper, faster, and lower NRE. Do you care about the smaller part, or do you care about the cheaper, faster? And he's like, it's impossible to do one without the other.
Yeah.
Last year, we hosted him at the factory. We showed him what we were building. We showed him the Mega, and he's like, I'm starting to become a believer.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in the market. Like, people are starting to believe that this is possible with every single piece of engineering that we show them. And once we prove it, it's going to be very clear that this is the right answer.
And again, I think the thing that I, from the outside as an investor kind of look at is, you've also been able to prove that by building, for this first Gravitas mission. The way you've built the business is, again, with a more vertical integration approach around the things that, truly matter for your satellite. And then, getting to scale and producing tens and then hundreds of these, there are only going to be cost efficiencies of scale that will go, but you've scoped the business and you've scoped what you're doing with just that core understanding that paradigm of being, smaller and, cheaper can actually be broken, and you can be bigger and cheaper at the same time.
Exactly. No one thought that was possible. In March, we'll prove it, right? And we'll show that it actually is.
We're excited for March. We're excited for the Gravitas mission. I mean, obviously there's, a lot of, different layers of success in that mission. Where does K2 go from here? I mean, what does the next year look like? What does the next 2, 3, 4 years look like in your business?
So in March with the first launch, we're going to learn a lot, right? We'll see how many of the subsystems work well together. We'll see what works and what doesn't. But the idea is to get as much data as possible, right? And I hope we collect a lot of data. From there, we're going to basically move to our next launch, which is, we announced a few weeks ago. It's called Trinity. We're going to launch 3 satellites and a dedicated Falcon 9 that we purchased for a mix of government and commercial customers. That'll happen in early 2027. And then from there, we're going to just rinse and repeat and scale up production. And so as we burn down risk on the Mega from a technical perspective, we're going to scale up production. Go from 1 this year to around 10 next year to 30. This factory is sized to do about 100 satellites per year. It's going to take us some time to get there, but that's where we want to get to. And if we get even close to that, that will fundamentally change how we operate in space. Like, just to give you a reference, last year this country produced less than 5 high-power, high-capability satellites in the country.
Wow.
We intend to produce 100 in this factory.
I mean, it's funny. I was talking with someone at Lightspeed yesterday, and they were going back and forth, and they're like, it seems like K2 is so well positioned to go attack and win parts of Golden Dome. And obviously I responded like, yes, obviously, like we're on a great path there. But then the other thing that they said was, do you realize how much money the government is not only, agreed to spend, but will have to spend in order to build this? And I think the aha moment for me was, if we're going to build President Trump's Golden Dome, and if we're going to have this true kind of constellation of space-based interceptors, missile warning, missile tracking, we are on the 1 yard line of what needs to be built in space. And I think the amazing thing that you are doing is you've made a product decision, both in size, scope, power, all those things, that has actually done the hard work in advance.
Yes.
And now it puts you in a position to go capture and be the catalyst of that entire Golden Dome boom.
I wish I could say I planned it from the start and knew Golden Dome was coming, but I think we got lucky there, right?
I won't say, maybe we'll see, but isn't the satellite also got a little gold on it?
It does have a little gold on it. Yeah. But it's super interesting. Like you look at Golden Dome, you're like, okay, there's a space-based interceptor layer. Well, what does that mean? A lot of payload mass. We built for that.
Yeah.
You look at the missile warning, missile tracking layer. What does that need? Well, you need to be able to proliferate a MEO. We built that.
Yeah.
Right. You look at certain parts of the comms layers that are behind and powering all of the applications in Golden Dome. What does that mean? A lot of power.
Yeah.
And so there's all these capabilities that we maxed out from the start, knowing that there are going to be different mission areas that need them. And now we're seeing them all come together with one thing like Golden Dome.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly ambitious, not only what we are trying to do as a nation and what we're trying to build. You know, what we want from a private and from an entrepreneur's perspective is you want bake-offs. You want the ability to prove that your tech can be more performant, can be better at a shorter amount of time. And I think unless, you know, the world understands the scope of what you've built and the work you've already put in, it's hard to believe that there's a future that you are not a part of in Golden Dome in some way.
It's a really interesting endeavor that we want to be a part of.
Maybe just to wrap, you're obviously building something like we talked about that is insanely important, not just for our nation, but I think the world and our safety and security.
Yep.
I mean, what's the long-term vision of K2? What does this look like in the next 10 years? If we play this out, I mean, obviously you're serving the government, you're serving commercials, like what's K2's role in the world?
Yeah, in the future, I'm going to view success as like what percentage of activities in space happen off of a K2 satellite, right? I don't even know all of the applications that are going to be built 10 years from now, but I know they're going to need a lot of power, a lot of mass, and the ability to be at low cost, rapid production rate, right? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to scale up production of the Mega here in this factory. We're going to go from 0 to 100, and then we're going to keep pushing up power. So the Mega was the first step, a 20 kilowatt bus, as powerful as the highest power satellites that have been built today. Next year, we're going to start working on the Giga, which is a 100 kilowatt satellite, which will be the highest power satellite that's ever been created.
I mean, we're talking football field side.
Exactly. If you can see it here, it basically goes from that side of the factory to the other side of the factory.
Super impressive. Maybe we'll leave it there. Congrats again on the Series C. I look forward to the Gravitas mission here in Q1, and thanks again for what you're doing for our country.
Great.
Thanks.